Welcome to the Gaia Report. I am Crystal Johnson, a co-host. Here in Massachusetts, we lead in environmental and energy policy nationally. And according to the ACEEE, the American Council of Energy Efficient Economy, we have been number one for many years for our leading policy. Today we have a very special guest who is a Massachusetts leader who has helped contribute to the diverse policy that has helped shape Massachusetts, serving as a model nationally, specifically regarding climate adaptation planning. Please join me in welcoming Massachusetts Senator Jamie Eldridge.
Crystal, thanks for having me on the show.
Yes, I'm so glad you're here. And one thing I'd love to share with everybody who's watching is that you've been a Massachusetts state senator since around 2009. Is that true?
That's right. I was a state representative for 6 years before.
Okay. But one fact that I found very interesting about you is that you've had a love of policy and public service and wanting to have great impact work since you were younger, and that really helped shape where you were going regarding your career. And I think that was an inspirational, understanding to have. How did that come about? Like, what were some of the influences that led you towards the path that you're on now?
Yeah, no, I get asked that a lot, and it's nothing particularly powerful, if you will, but it was just my mom was a kindergarten teacher, grew up in an era where she worked for John F. Kennedy for president, and just felt really that you could make a difference if you went into public service or government. So I really, thought about that growing up, and then in high school I got involved working for a state representative who was running for state senator, Bob Durand, who happened to be a particular champion of the environment. So
nice.
I got a very early introduction into the power of environmental policy and sort of followed his footsteps to eventually succeed him in the state senate seat that I hold now.
Nice. And it's my understanding that here in Massachusetts, that for, different leading policy, you've been involved from, enhancing and opening access regarding education and supporting public transportation and healthcare. But you're also really well known for your leadership in different environmental and energy work. Are there some things that you'd like to highlight? Because I know a great deal of your work, but
Sure.
Anything that you'd like to share first? Do you want to start off?
Sure, yeah. Well, first I would say a lot of it does go back to the district I represent, beyond State Senator Bob Durand. It's just that the district I represent, sort of the Acton-Marlborough district, there's a lot of environmentalists. There's a lot of people
that's great.
There's a lot of people that have formed local green action organizations to focus on climate change. Of the 14 communities that I represent, 11 of them are green communities.
Oh, that's great.
So they're getting money to make homes more energy efficient, to embrace solar panels on homes or community gardens. So many of my constituents are already leaders on this issue. So
That's
I really
great.
see it as sort of trying to best represent them.
Oh, that's nice.
And do my part. I would also say that I'm definitely of the generation that grew up knowing about climate change, seeing the impacts that we're seeing even this summer with the drought that is expanding across Massachusetts.
Yes.
So when I was elected as a legislator, really wanted to focus on filing legislation to combat climate change.
Nice.
So I was involved a fairly strong role in the 2008 Global Warming Solutions Act, the Green Communities Act. I would also mention, since we're in Brookline, that your state representative, Representative Frank Smizek, was a leader on that.
Yes.
So I certainly supported him in his efforts. But since then, I've worked on legislation to make sure that utility companies have to purchase more solar power through the net metering legislation, which we passed again this session. And at the very end of the session this year, we passed an omnibus energy bill that, for the really the first time in the country, so for all the states, requires utility companies to purchase offshore wind. So that'll happen over the next several years, about 1,600 megawatts of offshore wind.
I know last year that everybody in the state, especially a lot of solar companies, were really looking at what was going to happen with Massachusetts legislative voting on the net metering, and that was a big issue. So you just said that just recently in the last session, everything advanced?
Yeah, well, it's sort of a mixed mixed scene on the net metering front because
Okay.
we raised the cap on net metering.
Yes.
Unfortunately, in many areas, including this area, we've already reached the cap.
Yes.
So unfortunately, the legislature didn't go far enough.
Right.
And so I think we're going to have to revisit the issue next session.
Right, but at least it allows many additional projects to be, progress and to be furthered,
Absolutely.
so that's great.
Yep.
And now it's my understanding from what you just said that for your sustainable communities, that you have a lot of active citizens and they also help, drive what's happening in the communities and then you work
Yep,
with them.
absolutely.
And that's really key because some of the guests that we have here, people have different perspectives and different roles, but active citizenship is essential. And then it's great then to partner with supportive leaders, like yourself. And it's my understanding that there's some bills that you have helped advance that are key, especially for specific communities. I understand that you're involved with the bill regarding curbside composting.
Yes.
Can you
Yep.
tell me about that?
Yeah, well, that's, Crystal, we made some progress in Massachusetts on recycling, including curbside recycling.
Okay.
But the area that, really hasn't been addressed is compost,
Right.
How are we taking care of our food waste to make sure it
Yes.
doesn't end up at landfills.
Right.
So unfortunately, Massachusetts, that's really just sort of a local decision.
Right.
So it kind of varies. But the bill I filed would require all communities and the state to come up with a plan to require curbside composting
Oh, that's
for
great.
all communities. And, in cities like San Francisco, which currently do curbside composting, not only has it been good for the environment, but actually the city makes money off of it
Oh.
because they use the compost to turn into energy for the city through anaerobic digestion. So so that's one of the bills I filed statewide. Also speaking about sort of Brookline's activists, and
Yes.
really I think Brookline has among the best activists in the state, is I know that Brookline passed, I think, a plastic bag ban.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's also a bill that I filed statewide.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So just like Brookline was a leader on banning smoking in the workplace and in buildings about 15 years ago, now it's the lead on banning plastic bags. And so I think we've hopefully reached the point at the legislative level
Okay.
where we can do a statewide ban. It doesn't just have to be community by community.
Oh, that's wonderful, because I know that waste management, is such a key issue, and some people sometimes misunderstand like what that means, and it touches upon so many other related issues that you just tied in, like the plastic bags and the food waste, and
Sure,
they're all
compost, yep.
connected, but they have different impacts and associations. But that's good regarding the status there. Now, one thing that I mentioned before was Massachusetts is recognized as one of the most energy efficient states,
Yes.
and have to commend initially the former Governor Deval Patrick for his progressive,
Oh,
initiatives,
absolutely.
and even now with Governor Charlie Baker, continuing on. But it's my understanding you've been involved with how to make homes and buildings more energy efficient. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, Crystal. Massachusetts is still #1 in energy efficiency.
Nice.
But we're very close to being taken over by other states like California.
Right.
So we really have to, in order to remain in the lead, we need to pass additional legislation. So Governor Baker has done, I would say, a decent job of trying to continue the legacy of Governor Patrick.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I think he's falling short in a number of areas. And one area that it was hoping to pass this session is requiring all homes and buildings to have net metering standards. So what that would mean is any new home, new building, or a home that had a substantial renovation, that it would the house or the building would have to have a net zero energy. So that means more insulation, solar panels, whatever it takes, so that there's a zero impact on heating or
Wow.
providing electricity to that home. So unfortunately, the governor has not really embraced zoning reform or bolder policies, but I will file the bill again next session. It didn't pass this session. And then another bill that I filed that was originally in the energy bill, but
Okay.
it was taken out, is it's called the oil heat bill.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, under the Green Communities Act, we all pay an assessment or a fee on our electricity bill
Okay.
that funds the Green Communities Act.
Okay.
That creates a fund to make homes more energy efficient
Okay.
through the Mass Saves program.
Yes.
Unfortunately, if you heat your home with oil heat, which
Right.
is many homes in New England, including, of course, Massachusetts, there is no fee or assessment, and so therefore
Oh,
there's
wow.
no energy efficiency program for homes heated by oil.
Right, doesn't get captured.
So exactly. So the bill I filed would be a 5 cent per gallon on oil heat,
Okay.
and it would create a $20 million energy efficiency fund.
Oh, wow.
And it would also allow people to replace their old oil heaters with updated ones.
Right.
So that bill was in the Senate energy bill.
Okay.
And then unfortunately, because of the objection of the oil industry, it was removed from the omnibus energy bill. So it sort of shows that unfortunately, even at the State House in Massachusetts,
Right.
we have corporate interests that are fighting policies to combat climate change.
Right.
So I'll have to file that bill again next session. But I'm hoping we can maybe pass it, next year, because it did get through the Senate this year.
Right. And you made an interesting point earlier on that our status as far as being the most energy efficient and leading progressive state, it's potentially can be, impacted, adversely.
Right,
and then
right.
how do we move forward with the programs that we were working with that were progressive and had impact and had some next steps rather than moving in the other direction?
Absolutely. And again, I think Governor Baker is taking some steps,
Yes.
including around energy storage, but I don't think that he has as bold a vision as former Governor Patrick.
Right.
And I'm hoping we can, advance a stronger agenda next session.
Right. One thing I would like to highlight is that aside from your work that you mentioned with the composting and with the energies and the waste management with the plastic bags, is that you've also been involved previously regarding water. You had some involvement in a
Yes.
water bill, and I wanted to highlight that because for me, water, energy, the transportation that you also support, those are all critical pillars of climate adaptation planning. So can you share with me some of your work regarding water here in Massachusetts?
Absolutely, yeah. And water, Crystal, water is one of those issues that doesn't get a lot of headlines,
Right.
but it's so critical,
Yes.
especially this summer as the drought expands
Yes.
across Massachusetts.
Yes.
And there are some communities now in Massachusetts that have less than 30 days left of water
Wow.
for their community.
Right.
So what I did back in 2010 was create a Water Infrastructure Finance Commission
Okay.
to look at what are the needs for water infrastructure
Yes.
for the state, both drinking water and wastewater.
Yes.
And the analysis was that over the next 20 years, it's about a $40 billion infrastructure gap where the state or towns and cities aren't providing the money to maintain water infrastructure.
Okay.
So that's, treating water from our homes or businesses, or protecting our water supply through things like protecting open space. So the state really needs to step up and provide more investments to towns and cities to protect water infrastructure.
Yes.
And probably the most glaring example is Cape Cod,
Okay.
because they don't have a public water supply because of the sort of makeup of the Cape being such a sandy area with obviously surrounded by ocean. So they have a real issue with chemicals, with contamination, and they really need to invest to make sure as more homes get built there,
Yes.
that they have a proper water infrastructure to support Cape Cod,
Yes.
which obviously is such a critical part of the economy and
Yes.
tourism, but most importantly, just to deliver clean water to
Yes.
people of Cape Cod.
It's true from what you said earlier that most people don't really think about water, and they're hearing drought, including from what's been happening in California for many
Sure.
years, and that we're experiencing our own, but it's still not being highlighted or noticed much for me in the papers. And while people are focused on energy, which is a very big concern, and I'm very much for renewable energy, but I've always understood that energy we have, even if we're not keen on some of the dirtier ones. But for water, once that primary source is contaminated and you no longer have clean water, and then also how you manage wastewater, which is also equally to, how do you get and protect the original source, is super critical, and it's not on the radar of a lot of people. So I was really glad to hear for your water bill what it was touching upon, because water is something that you want to address well before you get to that severe drought condition for
Right.
people to wake up on.
Exactly, and I will say it's an example where, unfortunately, I don't think Governor Baker has taken strong enough leadership, because you have towns making making bans
Yes.
on their own. But I think it's time for regional or
Yes.
statewide bans
Yes.
and additional steps. Because there are too many communities that are still residents are using water for their lawns
Yes.
at a time when some towns are 30 days away from not having water for people to drink.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's significant. I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you.
highlighting the work that you're doing. And as you move forward to this next year, starting with a new session, what are some
Yeah.
of the goals that you have? You mentioned some, but what's something that you're excited about?
Yeah, I would say beyond the bills that I mentioned, I am hopeful on making progress on electric vehicles and getting the
Oh.
state to embrace them.
Okay.
So under
With state fleets, or what type of, or?
yeah, there's already state fleets and tax breaks thanks
Yep.
to former Governor Patrick.
Okay.
But really, the next stage is building the infrastructure so that there are electric charging stations
Yes.
across the state.
Yes.
So unless a resident can reliably expect that they can
Very
go
true.
within 10, 20 miles and charge their car,
Right.
they're not going to go and buy an electric vehicle.
Right.
And it's also something because of the presence of Tesla in Massachusetts.
Yes.
It's also good for the economy as well.
Yes.
So we're hoping that the state will embrace electric vehicles, including electric charging stations.
No, that's very key.
And then the next piece, which I know is very near and dear to residents of Brookline, is public transportation.
Yes.
Is unfortunately, I think we're not moving far enough along to invest in public transit. And so
It's very true. Those are big issues.
yeah, absolutely. So I think we need to find a way to properly invest in public transportation.
Yes.
Get people out of their cars and using public transportation. And unfortunately I don't see a lot of leadership at the state level on this, but I'm hoping we can make a breakthrough next session.
Nice. One item that always comes up when I talk about electric vehicles, especially with the charging stations, trying to get them to where they're solar powered. Because one discussion I had as an
Absolutely.
energy analyst with other people doing policy was that if we don't really advance on our renewable energies, and we want to also have electric vehicles, what is that source? Because if by chance there's such a large population and everybody using electric vehicles, could we still maintain like a clean source of energy? So making sure that as we design now for electric vehicles, to do it in such a way that it uses renewable energy sources, clean energy sources, so that it really is a sustainable transportation
Yep.
model.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yep, I agree.
I want to thank you so much for being on the show. You're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, I'd be honored to. Yeah,
And I want to
thank
say
you,
on behalf
Krista.
of Mother Nature, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us here with Massachusetts State Senator Jamie Eldridge. We are the Gaia Report.